Irashaimase. Hello and welcome to Fataris' Kitchen. I'm your host, Chef Fataris. It's time once again for Shoot 'em Up Saturday, and on the menu this week we have Super Dimension Fortress MACROSS. What kind of taste will it have? Let's get cooking and find out. From developer NMK and publisher Banpresto, Super Dimension Fortress MACROSS released to arcades in 1992. This was the first Macross arcade title, and it did not receive any console ports at the time, but jumped to December of 2024, and it's now available as an arcade archive for the PlayStation 4 and the Nintendo Switch, which is the version we're looking at today, though only on the Japanese storefronts. This game is based on the 1984 Macross movie Do You Remember Love? Being a longtime Macross fan myself, I was excited to dive into this release, and it's been fun for me, but overall it's not one that I would recommend for everybody. For the largest reason, it's only available on the Japanese storefronts for its respective consoles, so you do have to go through some extra effort to pick the title up. In addition to that, it's also selling at a premium price, similar to last year's Mazinger Z, so you have to decide if that's worth it for you. Overall, it's a relatively basic, straightforward vertical scrolling shoot 'em up, so those hoops might make it something that most people would want to take a pass on. With all that said, let's dive into the game itself and you can decide if this is a title that you'd be interested in or not. Once we put credits into the machine, we're taken to this awesome start screen here. Just as a heads up, if you see the fish head item in the game, that is the highest scoring point item, so definitely pick it up. The game does support 2-player simultaneous co-op, so that's how we'll be showing it off for you today. Starting things up. So one of the things I really love about this title are these animated cutscenes that take place between all the stages. They do a good job kind of giving you a flow of the story itself, and it doesn't matter if you're playing the Japanese or the international version that are included on this release. There's no text or voice or anything going on here, it's just the visuals themselves, which are really clean, full of color, and well animated. Once those end up, we're dropped into the game itself. So as I mentioned, this is a very straightforward vertical scroller. So the graphics on the stages themselves are a little toned down from those really good animated scenes that we have there, but that's not to go and say that I don't like what we have here. Especially in the first stage, we're going to see a lot of extra details going on in the background down below. You'll see people running around on the street. If we destroy enemies, you'll see the Zentradi, the giant alien race that we're fighting, running out of their mech suits. So it's really neat that you have just those bits of detail there. Now, getting back to the gameplay itself. So as far as our controls are concerned, this is a very straightforward vertical scroller. We have a primary shot and a nuke, and that's basically it. But we are flying the VF-1 Valkyrie fighters from the Macross series. So that means that we do have a little bit of extra options as far as our fighters are concerned. So initially you start in fighter mode, which you can change to at any time by getting a power-up with the F, or if you happen to lose a life, you'll restart as fighter mode. However, if you get a G power-up like this one here, then you change into Gearwalk mode, which, if you're not familiar with Macross, is basically kind of a cross between a fighter plane and a mech itself. So you've got the legs of a mech and the arms of a mech, but it's also still a fighter. And then the last mode is the Batroid mode. That's basically the full-on mech mode for the Valkyrie fighter. Let's see, doesn't look like we'll be able to show that one off. So the differences between those are the fighter itself has a spread shot, which can be powered up multiple times by picking up the P. The Gearwalk mode, which the Player 2 ship is currently in, has a really powerful laser that fires straight forward. It's great for taking on bosses or more powerful enemies. And then the last form, the Batroid form, fires homing missiles as well as a straight shot. There's also one other rare form that you can either get through continues or sometimes running across it in the stage itself, which is an A, and that will activate the armored Valkyrie form, where you're firing a powerful grenade straight forward in addition to having a spread shot. So this is the Batroid form, where you're firing those homing missiles. If you're not interested in changing form, the capsules that will change will eventually scroll off the screen, but they only come down so far on the screen, so if you stay at the back, you won't pick those up. The other power-ups are the Ps for increasing your power, and those go up several levels. And then there's also one that looks like it has a nuclear symbol on it, And when you pick it up, they have the UN bomb on there. So those are your reaction weaponaries. They basically are, reaction weapons. Those are the nukes for this particular series. They will clear out the weaker enemies and the enemy shots on the screen, so they're pretty effective, and the game is generous with how many they give you and how many you can carry. You can carry up to 8, and you can also level up the ship quite substantially for all the shots that way. Unfortunately, you are set back to level 1 when you die, so keep that in mind. The game progresses through 7 levels, each level kind of giving you a little bit of the story of the movie itself, and then once you defeat the final boss, you are taken to a second loop, and finishing that second loop will go and get you the true ending of the game. One thing that's nice about this particular arcade release is you can set it to start on the second loop, so if you're looking to take care of that element and just like see the ending of the game, that's one way to do it. Some of the stages, like I said, do have a planar background, and the second stage where we're fighting in the rings of Saturn is a perfect example of that. However, with these ice shards, there's some really neat little things that the developers did. There's some points in the gameplay where you've got the enemies hiding behind the asteroids, and just like that sort of thing. I really like that bit of design. However, especially with 2 players, you can make short work of a lot of it. Now we find ourselves moving on to the 3rd stage of the game, and once again, just say I love these cutscenes, but like so many 3rd stages for shoot 'em up, this one is another stage where you're taking on a massive battleship. First off, we take on that battleship that we saw in that cutscene, and then later on we'll take on an even larger battleship. That's your main boss and really the bulk of the stage itself. And there you have it. So that's the basics of Super Dimension Fortress Macross served up for your enjoyment. So as far as the minus flavors are concerned, the first major one that I have is just the problem with the Macross series in general. So especially the earlier entries in the series have really complicated rights issues between, well, I'm not going to get too much into it, but because of that, this release is likely not going to be seen outside of the Japanese region, and it just has to go and do with licensing restrictions, which is quite frustrating. Another thing that I don't like about the game is it does just have that problem with powering you down. And even as far as the power level is concerned, I don't really care as much about that. However, there are situations where if you're fighting, like say, the final boss, you're always coming back as the fighter when you die. It would have been great if you could have at least respawned as the form that you died in. So say you were in Garewalk and that was where you died, that you'd come back in that form. That would have been awesome. But as far as the plus flavors are concerned, so I think a lot of attention to detail on this one went into those cutscenes between the stages themselves. But if you're a fan of the series, you're definitely going to appreciate some of the just attention to the artwork that's there. In addition to that, the game, like while the backgrounds might be plain, you do have all those enemies and ships from the Macross series represented as throughout the course of your gameplay, and I really appreciate just seeing those, the Valkyries that we're fighting, the Zentradi ships, like this one that we're fighting against. All of that is stuff that I really love, and like the way that they're presented, I think, is definitely justice to the source material. And for me, the last plus flavor is just like the fact that it's Macross. Definitely this one's not going to go and be a title for everybody, but if you're a fan of the series and you're looking to go, or you're looking to go and pick up a licensed arcade title, and you don't mind picking things up off of the Japanese eShop or the Japanese PSN, then this might be a title that's worth looking into. And with that said, we find ourselves at the end of this week's episode of Shoot 'em Up Saturday. As always, I want to thank you so much for joining us. We hope you have a wonderful week yourself, and we look forward to seeing you again next time.